Hello there, how's it going? In today's video, I will be talking about taking an idea and going through the entire product development process to make it become reality, hit the shelves, hit the market. Because if you're anything like me, one of your big dreams is to see an idea of yours come into reality on the market, where you can just go to the next store, look at the shelves, and point towards the things that you worked on, that were your ideas, that you thought of, and that people can now enjoy for themselves right there in front of you. So if that's also one of your dreams, then maybe you want to stick around, watch the video, and see if there's a path you can take to make this dream come true for you. Alright, so this is the overview of today's video. At first, I will go through the process as a whole. I will highlight the different stages that we are going through during the process of product creation, talk about the important aspects for each of these stages, and once we went through one of these cycles as a whole, I want to talk about what to do next, what happens after you actually finish the product creation cycle. And I also want to take time to talk about why certain businesses fail that start with products in the market. This is the process overview. I use this process because this is the familiar process and system that I'm used to as a product designer. So we have a discovery stage, research, ideation, the concept phase, detailing, and production, right? So in the discovery stage, it's all about finding a valid product idea that you will turn into the product. The research phase is about identifying the right market and the right niche, looking into the potential target groups, end users, consumers. In the ideation phase, then we will actually start thinking about creating our first solutions for the problem that we identified, and we further develop it in the concept phase, we validate it, create prototypes. In the detailing stage, it's really all about making things ready for the market. So this is also the details in terms of production and being in communication with the first suppliers and having things basically getting ready for the product launch. And in the production itself, then it's really about the last fine details before you can mass produce or at least use upscale production for selling your product on the market, right? And now this looks like a linear process, but actually the main process from research all the way through detailing is an iterative where you potentially have to go back and forth and cycle through in order to get to the most viable outcome. All right, so now I will talk about all stages one by one to make sure we understand what's the most important aspects for each of these stages. So let's begin with the discovery. Here, it's all about problems before product. So it's not like that you have a product idea already that you want to turn into a business, but you should ideally start with the problem that needs solving, right? A good way to do that is by getting into a problem solving mindset. Firstly, look at your own problems that you have on a daily basis. What are problems that you need solved, and see if a solution is not satisfactory for you, that you feel like you can improve on, and you just know that there are people out there that potentially have the same problem. So some strategies to find valid problems or valuable problems would be to check your Google search history for hints. Like, what did you look up because you didn't have a clear answer to in the first place? Check your emails. What is a constant problem that appears when you go through your work emails potentially? Is there a communication issue? So if you start to actively look for unsolved problems, you will quickly understand or notice that there's like a lot of problems still unsolved around us, and each of those is a potential idea for the product business. If you found a problem, do you feel like you can relate personally? Is that something, are you solving your own problem? Or are you just trying to do business for the sake of business and getting money? Because I think if it's all about business and money, then the idea is probably much less important. Then you can basically just take whatever has high potential for return, which would be probably more like a digital product that you can scale easily. But if you feel like this is a product business where you actually have to spend also upfront money, and you have to really, as the founder, stand behind your product. I feel like it can be of high value if you have a personal connection to your own idea and the problem that you're solving. So for the outcomes of this stage is that you have defined several problems. The next stage is the research stage, right? So we found a few problems. So now we want to validate these problems. Do other people have similar problems or not? So we go on Amazon reviews and see all the 3-star ratings or even lower ones in a product category that is tackling a similar problem. We look if there are existing solutions out there. We check the market, like is it a saturated market? Are the people happy with the solution, or is it just a partial solution of the problem? Is the problem much bigger, or is it one aspect of the problem? Also, this could be an important aspect at this stage to identify if you have a painkiller with the solution that you have in mind, or just a nice to have. Painkillers are the problem solutions where people are really willing to spend money on, while nice to haves are the ones that they think, could be cool, but when it's about actually committing and spending dollars on it, then they are much less likely to do so. So if you have the feeling that there is a problem that other people share, then are you able to identify your niche and scan the market? Like what kind of people and potential customers are within that niche? Who are they? What are the demographics? What are relevant habits? What is their potential budget that you can already have in mind? And also, I think this is the right moment to build a network, start and connect and verify your idea and solution by being part of the community in that niche. You can already start setting up a landing page, collecting waiting lists for a mock-up product, or just talking about your idea with other people to make sure it's actually of value to the niche that you're targeting, right? The outcomes of this research phase would be that you have a clear understanding of the problem. You have a clear understanding of the potential niche and the people that use it. You have a clear understanding of the market, the existing products on the market, potential competitors, potential price ranges. You have a clear understanding of the target user, and you have first insights into the pricing. And you have also first insights into viable sales models, like is it distributed via online sales channels? Is it local vendors? Like what are the sales models that actually sell this product and bring it to the market? The next stage is the ideation stage. So now you found a problem and you have an idea that solves it. Now it's really about getting into it and developing it into a realistic product. What we want to do is we want to understand the minimum viable product. So that means what's the product, the minimum product that serves and solves the problem that we are thinking about to solve in the most basic way, right? So what are the absolute minimum functional requirements that this product would have to have in order to solve the problem? And then you probably need some functional requirements that are specific to your niche and target group that you have to define at this stage. So you also want to define the scope of the product as a whole, like the hardware. So what parts, what components are relevant for this product, but also in terms of software. Do you need software? If so, what's the dimension and scope of the software? Do you need like an actual app that runs on it, or is it very basic code that you could potentially do yourself? So if you have a better idea about those things, you can actually go in and start ideating, sketching out the first ideas. So the outcomes of this stage would be that in the ideation that you have a clear understanding of your solution now, you have a clear understanding of the functional requirements of the solution, and you have a clear understanding of the product scope, meaning dimensions, but also all the different components you need, the software parts, the hardware parts. You have a first insight into the brand identity because during the ideation you already set your sketches up to fit the target niche, right? So they also semantically, aesthetically are supposed to get their attention to appeal to those people. And you also get first insights into marketing narrative. So what stories could you connect to the product? What stories does the product tell? And now I want to take the moment to make a short break and look at the entire process overview again. We covered the discovery, we have an idea, we did the research, and we create our first solutions as sketches on paper. So we more or less passed half of the product design process already, but I want to make sure that you also understand that it's not just the product design process that we have to think about, right? We also have to consider finance as a whole. We have to start considering marketing and sales. How are we going to finance the development of the product? Do we have clear marketing ideas, channels ready to go, or at least a clear understanding what they will be, so we can get them up and running at the time? And do we also have clear idea about how we are going to sell the product when it's ready? So these are all parallel processes that you have to have in mind at the very beginning, basically already, and take each stage also to evolve and inform those other processes for you to get to a mature product by the end. I will still focus on the product design process because that's just the experience that I have from working in an industrial design field. But I just want to highlight that there are so many more aspects to creating and building a business that is based off on a product than just the design. The next stage would be the concept phase, right? So we came up with a nice idea that satisfies the basics. So now it's time to actually go in there and build the minimum viable product. So we start prototyping, 3D printing. We use off-the-shelf components just to replicate all the functions that we see or that we need to get the solution built. And we use those prototypes to refine the idea into a final concept. Everything is clear. The appearance, the aesthetic, the materials. Potentially you already get a clear understanding of the manufacturing techniques that you're going to use and can start already thinking about the costs that this might require. So our goals would be to get a first fully working prototype and make a first product mockup in appearance, right? With the right materials, in the right colors, and in the proper dimension. So this can be one thing, one prototype that looks like the final thing and that works like the final thing. But also often what we have is like a visual model that just looks and feels like the real deal, and a functional prototype where the components are still not custom, so they are potentially bigger than they should be, but they work exactly as we need to. This combination already is enough to make sure that you can tell your story and sell the idea and gather interest. And also I want to highlight that at this stage the costs start increasing, right? Because you have to pay the materials for the prototyping, you have to pay for the machines or the services that actually build the prototypes for you, you have to order components or outsource the work that you can't do yourself, like app development, software development, PCB printing, whatever. So here you really start to spend money, but for the outcomes of this stage, you have a final product concept and a fully functioning prototype. You also have the fully representative visual mockup, and you were able to validate this in the crowd. You can share the first images, you can talk to people in your niche from your network. You also have a realistic cost assumption because now you are clear about product scope and all the details it entails. You can already start creating early marketing materials, build momentum, build an audience, and you also have a realistic target price at this stage because you are more aware of the costs that will come at you. So the next stage would be the detailing stage. So you have a working product sample. Now is the time to get out there. With the prototype, you can approach investors. You can create first videos and photos. You can start building a crowdfunding campaign with those materials, and you can showcase your product on fairs, exhibitions, start and talk to real people with real issues about your problem, and to see if there's still things that you miss that are crucial functions, or things that you wanted to implement that actually show to be redundant. Most people don't actually care about whether or not this function is in the product. So based on the feedback that you get during this stage, you can still react and make final adjustments. You can also be more clear about how many products you expect to ship and adjust your manufacturing processes accordingly and find the suitable ones for the number of products that you expect to sell. In terms of actual work on the product, you still have to develop the draft angles. You have to think about snap fits. You have to consider regulatory issues and certifications. Are there electronic components in there that need certification in order to be sold? So when you know how things are going to be made, you can also prepare the product for manufacturing, right? So you apply the drafts and snap fits if needed. You consider the regulatory issues and certifications, and you can start sourcing the potential suppliers and get initial offers. It's important that you assess the costing as soon as you can. So how much does the production cost? But also, what about logistics, storage, assembly, shipping? Where do we store stuff? How does it go from here to there? Who is assembling it? Where is it being assembled? And do you need to pre-assemble certain things? Like there's so many parts to this process that you have to consider at this stage. So you also get to think about a feasible pricing strategy because you get a much clearer understanding of the costs that will come at you. So the results of the detailing stage would be you have a final product design, you have first supplier offers, you have fulfilled all the regulations and gathered all the certifications that you need. You have created a bunch of marketing assets and you're product packaging is in development or it's an off-the-shelf packaging, you also have confirmed your pricing and defined a clear marketing strategy with assets ready to go. You have defined your sales channels and basically prepare everything for the product launch already. So you basically, the creative and fun part for designers is usually done here. And this is really about getting things done, making things real, cost, price, finances, strategies, marketing, sales. And the last stage is the production, right? So now you have a supplier and you have an infrastructure sorted. So it's time to evaluate the first out of tool. So what usually happens is that you have a supplier, you send them the 3D files, they prepare everything for manufacturing, set up the programming that they need for the work and build the tool. And you get a first product sample based on the final and original manufacturing process of the product. And now you do the last evaluations. Are there still optimizations that we have to implement for, I don't know, if it's injection molded, for the flow to be better, for the sink mark to disappear? Maybe the wall thickness is not equal everywhere yet, or there are some other undercuts that need sliders. So there are all these things that in discussion with the manufacturer, you will be able to sort out and that you have to still adjust further. Here also, you have to make sure that the quality matches your expectations, right? Does color, surface texture, material, everything show as agreed? Do you feel like you have found the right supplier for your target, or is it just like a cheap replication of the actual idea that you plan to serve the market? But once that is ready, you made it, right? You have gone through all the stages of the product development and your product is made, it's assembled and delivered. Your marketing is running the pre-launch efforts and your product is ready for shipment to the customers. From here on, it's more or less getting things out there as much as possible. But yeah, this is the huge milestone that you have been waiting for at the beginning of this journey. So this is also a moment where you can look back and reflect on all the lessons that you learned within that process. All right, now you have gone through the entire process. You built your business based on your product and solution. But what's next? So you have launched your first product and are a business owner now. What's next? What I see is that usually people get into the mode of real business owners now. So they never stop acting. They're never bored. They always have the next thing in mind already. And also just don't underestimate the time that it takes to just run the business, the day-to-day of the business. There's not much time to focus on all the great joy and the pleasure and the first dollars coming in, because now you're also responsible, right, for a business. That means that you have to make sure that everything goes fluently. You have to make sure that the customers are happy, that refunds are being processed, that the manufacturer is delivering on time, that you get all the materials sourced correctly. But what usually happens is that you see that your product is taking off, so you have to start thinking about scaling also. So your focus shifts from development of a product business to sales and growing sales channels, potentially growing the manufacturing numbers, get higher sales out there. You can still improve on your product, obviously. So maybe there were some things that were not feasible to implement in the first product, even though you know there would be great additions, but there was just no time or no money to implement them. But now with the profit revenue first streams coming in, you are sure to bring up the next version of your product, right? So the improved alternative, the next update that would also establish you as a serious business in the niche that you defined for you. And obviously you can also always just repeat the process, grow the business into an entire brand by expanding the portfolio, looking into similar products that would fit the niche, fit the user. Do they have other problems that are related? And you have now gathered so much experience from building your first business that it helps you tremendously for your next idea in the next business. And lastly, I want to talk about why do we fail? Why do companies fail that want to build interesting problem solutions, interesting products? And from my understanding of how things go and my experience as an industrial designer, I would say it's those 5 things mostly. It's the cost, it's the regulations, it's that there's no real market for the product, it's the operational side of the thing, or it's the execution that is lacking. What does that mean? Cost, I think, is the most relevant problem, and especially the underestimation of cost, right? You want to make a product, but it's so expensive. Just the tooling could easily be 20K or more to get like a tiny plastic piece made for you in higher numbers, right? So it's like a tremendous cost that usually eats up all of the savings. So this is where people often feel the pressure when they see the realistic costs and revenue streams, and they understand that they won't just easily get rich from this stuff, and there's a high risk attached to actually spending that money, because you can never be 100% certain that this thing is going to take off the way you expect it to, right? And what do you do when everything falls apart? But also, the scope is underestimated. So it's not just the manufacturing costs that come at you, but it's also the shipping costs, storage costs, taxes have to be considered, refunds, especially with products. The costs are so much more high than just software. Another major issue is the regulations, right? Regulations, there's like, especially in the EU, but also in the US, and I think all across the world, things are highly regulated at the moment. So if you think about toys, there's specific regulations, electric goods, everything where electrical components are inside, you have to make sure to fulfill specific regulations. Medicals, anyway, you have to be super safe. Food, the same. So there are all these regulations that you really have to consider from the get-go, and you have to fulfill certain tests to make sure that you meet the regulations. You have to get certain certificates to make sure that you are covered. It's like all these things, they also are a huge cost factor, obviously. You can easily be overwhelmed by regulations if you try to do everything by yourself. There's like specific lawyers even just for patent, for regulations, for certifications that help you sorting things out, because there's also so many different things going on, right? Different countries have different forms, different regulations. There's so much to consider. It becomes absolutely unclear what's relevant. So this is a huge stopper for a business without the right partners from within the industry or potential investors that already have experience in the market that can guide you correctly and thoroughly through the process. Another failure point is also that we don't have a market. So we did fall in love with the product and not with the problem. So nobody is actually willing to spend the money on the product. That's where I talked about, is it a painkiller or a nice to have? So we feel like the idea is cool, but it's not actually adding enough value to the user that they are willing to spend money on it. So that easily happens when we overdevelop an unvalidated idea, right? So we spend a lot of time to fully develop a product idea that we have, but we don't spend the same amount of time that we would need to validate if the product is actually interesting to the market, if people care about the problem, the product, if the product actually solves the problem that we're trying to solve. So early validation is key. At that stage, you can still make all the changes that you potentially need to make. But if you just keep going without listening to what you hear, then you go with the risk that there is no market for you in that specific product solution. Other issues or reasons for business failure are the operational side of it. So I think the biggest one is issues with the supplier, right? That the first out of tool was coming out okay, but the second batch somehow very strongly from the original. Or there's a huge delay in the production and therefore also in the shipment, and that is unsatisfactory, right? The quality is just dropping with ongoing development or ongoing sales, because the supplier has other priorities now. They have you as their client, right? So they don't have to impress you anymore, potentially. So that often can be a problem, especially if there's no backup or talk to when things are not going right, especially also when we have suppliers in completely different countries where communication might be difficult, where getting somebody to take charge becomes difficult in the problem. So this can be a huge roadblock. So it's always important to have a potential backup supplier. You know, before you actually start manufacturing, that there are other companies that could provide the same service according to the quality that you aspire. And obviously, we could again have underestimated the complexity of the whole thing. That we have goods produced, but they still need assembly, right? And assembly is also an expensive thing. Many parts require potentially manual labor, right? Or we haven't thought about it well enough that it's actually an easy assembly process, but it's highly complicated. It takes a lot of manpower to do the assembly. So this is another factor that I would regard in being part of the operational reasons why we fail. And the last point that I want to highlight is the execution, right? I think so many of us have great ideas, but taking action is hard because it takes time, it takes patience, it's scary, and it's so much more easy to just go about our day to day without risking our lives, our savings, everything in one idea of us. And another thing is that even if we are willing to do the thing, that we understand during the process of creating our own business that design is just a very small part of it. And if you are a designer and you feel like, it's so cool, I can develop infinite amounts of products, that's right. But design is just a small part of it, right? Being a business owner means also being responsible for all the other aspects of the product development that are not design and that are not creative, that are not fun, potentially. So yeah, business owners can't always do what's fun. They have to make sure that everything runs smoothly. They have to be in contact with all the suppliers, with the shippers. They have to make sure that the feedback is being taken in, that they stay connected to the target group, that they are representing the product on fairs and exhibitions. So that's like so much to the whole thing of creating a business that if you actually just enjoy being a creative, then maybe business ownership is not the best thing for you. Then you might want to do freelancing instead, where you can really pick your own assignments, your own creative assignments, and work on them and get more money from it compared to if you were just a regular employee, right? But obviously it also comes with own risk, but with its own advantages, independence. So yeah, so that was my take on how to bring a product idea to the market and become a business owner based on the product design framework. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see as many problem solutions out there developed by you guys, and good luck. Thank you very much.